This is the Last Temptation of John podcast, and I am John. I want to welcome you to the show. Now, this is an audiobook, and I'm currently reading through a trilogy of books that make up the Last Temptation of John book series. If you've been with us so far, then you've completed Book 1, The Pawns of Prophecy. If you haven't listened to that book, go back and do that now, starting with Episode 1 of this podcast. If you're all caught up, then I invite you to join me as we read Book 2, The Rise of the Antichrist. In today's show, I'm going to start by reading to you chapters 1 and 2. If you remember, the end of Book 1 ended with a few cliffhangers. Our friend Alan Zarus was captured by the Antichrist, and Pope Benedict seemed to be caught up in a conspiracy to murder one of the most beloved leaders in the world. It's time to start getting some answers to the questions that were raised in Book 1, as well as discover a few more mysteries. If you're ready to get started, then let's go. I'm calling Chapter 1, The Watcher. The date is June 24th. John Salem, who are you? What are you? These were the thoughts of a tired old man, my thoughts, as I lay in bed, unable to get anything but another fitful sleep. Caught between the dream world and the real, I cried out to God, I am confined to a life I cannot escape. Why do you inflict me so, God? All day long your terrors destroy me, and darkness is my closest friend. For those of you non-Bible readers, that's Psalm 88. I wailed this and other similar thoughts I can no longer remember, and then I mercifully passed out again. A few bottles of Jack Daniels will do that to you. An hour later I woke up, only to get another terrifying vision. I watched as a silent stalker was prowling the grounds of a Middle Eastern palace complex. It was late in the day, perhaps during the second watch, and yet still a multitude of guards roamed the stronghold. It didn't take me much effort to realize where this vision was. Baghdad, capital of the Uman Empire. For thousands of years, this city marked the center of a war-torn region. Yet all that changed when Dr. Ghazal Ridwan Mehboob took over some 3 years past. And although you and I now know that Dr. Mehboob has the power of the supernatural at his disposal, his coup at the time was nothing if not peaceful. In fact, as far as I know, not a single shot was fired during Dr. Mehboob's formation of the Union of Many Allied Nations, aka the Uman League. Mehboob's peaceful ascension to power was due to two reasons. One, the Brotherhood of Earth was backing him. And two, as a result of number one, immediately upon his ascension to the throne, Dr. Mehboob had the power of the armies of Iran, Iraq, Egypt, and the Arabias at his disposal, having used the Brotherhood's resources to earn support from the leading generals of that area in exchange for quenching their greed with land and wealth. A successful recipe for bribery that has proven successful for thousands of years. And with a new giant suddenly facing them, and the Brotherhood of Earth's coercion, the countries of Israel, Syria, and Turkey were powerless to resist the Uman League's advance. Thus they too were swallowed by the expanding nation. And in less than 6 months, Dr. Mehboob controlled the entire Middle East and most of northern Africa. And since the Brotherhood controlled the world media and the United Nations, his coup was without condemnation. If anything, it was hailed as a world blessing. Why, even the powerful dictators President Trump and President Putin praised the move. As for Baghdad, once Dr. Mehboob chose it as his capital city, the city experienced a cultural rebirth. A much-needed recovery from the destruction of the American invasions during the past 2 decades. And so, bringing in engineers and designers from the world over, Dr. Mehboob turned the fortunes of the city and its people. His renaissance soon extended to the rest of the Uman Empire, their people suddenly enjoying a newfound prosperity. Facts that were highly publicized in the media and which further increased Dr. Mabou's world stature. For the hundreds of years, nobody in the Middle East had been as happy as they were now. Yet while his citizens were well cared for, it was the city of Baghdad itself that was clearly Dr. Mabou's first love, and he put much effort into making it a world jewel, starting with the reconstruction of its most imposing building, the 600-room palace of King Nebuchadnezzar II. Overlooking the Euphrates and shaped like a ziggurat, the new palace was built upon the very locale where the ancient Babylonian king's palace also once stood. And with some of Nebuchadnezzar's original bricks still rising a few feet above the earth, Dr. Mabou's workers installed countless more sand-colored bricks, inscribing all of them with the following words: Mabou, protector of the human race. The monstrous new hilltop fortress was surrounded by lush, Eden-like gardens, reminiscent of the famous hanging gardens that were once known as a wonder of the world for centuries. Spanning more than 5 football fields in width, Dr. Mabou's complex showcased a limitless array of impressive towers, arched gates, and majestic stairways. Lavish in the extreme, many of the walls were painted with 360-degree murals in honor of ancient Babylon, and the Tower of Babel, not to mention more than a few of Dr. Mabou himself. Yet none of this ostentation mattered much to me, and clearly not to the silent stalker I was watching, for I knew that she was not here to admire the architectural beauty of Dr. Mabou's realm, but was instead on an altogether different mission. After all, although the world still viewed Dr. Mabou, who was a leader on fire for world peace, after the events at the end of Book 1, you and I know better now, right? So I had to assume that my little spy also knew the same. And if by chance she hadn't known about Dr. Mabou's more nefarious side before her arrival, surely she must have realized it by now. For with practically every step she took in her covert journey, the dictator's palace grounds were filled with an in-your-face military presence. If the Human League's capital was patrolled by menacing guards trained to shoot first and ask questions later. And yet, none of the guards even noticed our spy. For I'd already watched as Dr. Mabou's unwelcome and as yet unknown intruder had no trouble slithering her way over walls, past the eyes of countless patrols, and eventually into her present hiding spot. And while I was not all that surprised to see her be able to pull off a stunt like this, I'm sure you must be wondering how she managed to penetrate Dr. Mabou's defenses so easily. Oh, I suppose one could argue that it's not completely unthinkable for a lone intruder to scurry past a host of wandering guards. We've seen that in the movies, right? And I guess it's theoretically feasible for such an invader to bypass the many other security systems, provided they knew all the checkpoint codes, the secret passwords, and had knowledge of a host of other miscellaneous security challenges. And yet even then, our assailant would need quite a bit of luck, wouldn't they? However, I say what happens in Hollywood movies and what's possible in theories is far from likely in reality, right? Unless, of course, the invader has more than luck on their side. You see, such was the case for our friend Miriam Magdala. You remember her from Book 1, right? Always a thorn in my side. And so it goes. We get to start today with a vision of Miriam.
No.
Lord help me, there's not enough Jack Daniels in the world to get me through that. Moving on to Chapter 2, I'm calling this Psychic Probes. The date is still June 24th, and we're still following Miriam. You see, there's something I forgot to tell you about her. She has a rather unusual gift. Oh, I don't really understand it, but it has something to do with her being a kind of body-mind master. You see, she can control her body in such a way that she can overcome almost any physical obstacle. But it's more than just that, for Miriam is also an unparalleled mentalist. Not only can she communicate with thought alone, but more importantly, she has this strange ability to influence others. It's a talent she calls her psychic probe, an Asmovian telepathic skill which, as she once explained, allows her to literally get inside the mind of another person, peel through their cerebral layers, and then reconnect the fibers of their brain in such a way that the other person will do whatever Miriam commands them to. Now do you see why this woman freaks me out? Oh, sure, she says she would never try her psychic probe on me or Alan, but I don't trust her. And while I know that Miriam learned these skills ages past, she always refused to tell Alan or I exactly who taught them to her. I can't imagine it was Jesus, and I don't think it was the angel Gabriel. You know, I've often wondered if Miriam ever dabbled in the dark arts. I mean, we all have at one point. If only because 2,000 years is a hell of a long time to live. It gets boring after a while, you know? But Miriam is just so pure. I could never picture her doing anything other than wearing a white dress up to her neck and praying her rosary beads in church all day long. But then again, I'm currently watching her slink around like some secret agent dressed in tight black leathers and seemingly fully prepared to destroy other people's minds to get what she wants. So there is that. I guess you never know a person until you walk a mile in their shoes, right? But Miriam's psychic probe ability is just weird, man. I mean, I think the technique is dangerous both to her and the person she's trying to influence. But Miriam always claimed that she was such a master at the craft that she could enter another person's mind with a touch so light that her probing would leave no memory in the mind of their subject, and certainly that it would do no harm. Yeah, right. Well, Miriam once told Alan and I that her probe was conducted in such a way that she doesn't act until she locates a group of brain fibers that had a natural tendency to perform in the specific manner she wants them to. And although she says it's sometimes tedious to find such a group of cerebral fibers, Miriam always claimed she could complete a probe in the merest fraction of a second. I guess the realm of the mind is a universe with a different time scale. But your guess is as good as mine. Hey, look, I'm just telling you what she told me. I'm sure Miriam will use it during this vision, so you'll be able to see for yourself. Despite its effectiveness, Miriam claimed that she only used her telepathic powers as a last resort in the most dire of situations, for she said she feared being corrupted by its power. And that's probably true, for even I will admit that Miriam is first and foremost a God-fearing woman, ever on guard against being tempted away from the one true path, and obviously far different than me. However, the capture of our friend Alan Zarus by the Antichrist was a situation which surely must have met Miriam's definition of quote-unquote dire straits. Therefore, I'm sure she wouldn't hesitate to use her psychic probe as often as she needed to in order to gain access into Dr. Mebu's inner stronghold as quickly as possible. And so, understanding the mystery of how she maneuvered unseen, I now watched as Miriam found herself in the innermost courtyard of King Nebuchadnezzar's palace, outside a window that looked onto the section of Dr. Mebu's private chambers. At present I could see that Miriam had shrouded herself within the confines of a massive statue that towered in the middle of that courtyard, and yet, as I looked upon the sculpture wherein Miriam hid, I felt my spine melt from the evil essence that oozed from the monument stones. For the statue was a monstrosity. Carved from some unknown red rock, it depicted a beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. With the scaly tail of a dragon, its giant body resembled that of a leopard. Yet it was poised on humongous bear-like feet that skirted a 20-foot wide pond beneath it. Yet none of these features matched the fear-inspiring sight of its 7 heads, each depicting the features of a tortured lion whose eyes scowled a ghastly mixture of fear and anger. And while each of the heads portrayed a different scowl, all of them spewed forth a miasma of black water. The statue left me with but one conclusion. This beast wanted to destroy any who looked upon it. And although Miriam and you might not recognize it, I immediately knew this statue for what it was. The Beast of Revelations, chapter 13. Therefore I knew Miriam was in deep trouble. And yet, if she felt it, Miriam didn't show it. Instead, I could see her steeling herself to remain where she was, for the view she had into Dr. Mabou's rooms that opened from this courtyard was apparently unmatched by any other vantage point she'd found so far. Thus, despite the malevolence that emanated from the statue, Miriam kept her cover and waited, obviously hoping to see our friend Alan and confirm that he was still alive. Was there any hope for Alan? Or Miriam? You'll have to wait till the next chapter to find out. Well, that's the end of our show for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Now be sure to visit our website at temptationofjohn.com, where you can read the full text version of this chapter, get access to exclusive interactive media content only available online, and go behind the scenes with additional references about the Apostle John, Mary Magdalene, the Antichrist, the Book of Revelation, and much more. On our website, you'll find links to every podcast episode, and you can also join the Temptation of John Book Club. It's free to join, and you can get notified when new chapters are released, and even interact with the author. That's yours truly. Again, you'll find all this and more at temptationofjohn.com. Hey, before we move on, I've got to tell you about this book called The Action Bible. If you have children, particularly boys or girls that like comic books, and you want to kind of expose them to the wisdom of the Bible, you'll find no better resource than the Action Bible. I mean, this thing has over 2,500 reviews on Amazon, and almost every single one of them is a 5-star review. It is a picture Bible that's really one of the most complete versions I've seen. It's very captivating, very up-to-date, and it's very visually focused. Over 215 really fast-paced narratives. They go in chronological order and make it really easy to follow the Bible's historical flow. Lots of thrilling climaxes, but they also very clearly communicate, the message of the Bible as well, too, to younger readers. So if you're interested in that, make sure you go to temptationofjohn.com/sponsors, and I can give you a direct link to learn more about this Bible. Again, it's called the Action Bible, and you can find it on our webpage, temptationofjohn.com, with a direct link to Amazon. All right, let's move on to the next chapter.